Welcome back to 8 Cubes. I'm Cam Best. He's Lamby series. We talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap every week. Thank you so much for stopping by. We're going to start with Redwing, the newest card in Marvel Snap, releasing on Tuesday. Redwing is a 3/4 that one time per game, when it moves, will pull a card from your hand to the location that it moved from. Meaning that this is effectively a card that just makes a free card just for moving, but, and this is crucial, unlike a lot of the other move cards in Marvel Snap, it is not a card that scales with the ability to move it multiple times. This is not necessarily a Madam Web card. This is not a move bounce card. This is a card that goes with one move and then it's done. It is a bullet, is a gun with one bullet in the chamber. And that is a unique design position for a card. What do you think about Redwing, Lambie?
Personally, I'm super excited for this card because, I mean, in general, I love cards that just scream free mana, like Malekith, Anti-Venom, that kind of thing. Like they just let you get free stuff out. This one is very interesting because it lets you get free stuff out of your hand, albeit a bit random, right? But like if you play a 3/4 okay stats, you move it once, you get a chance to drop something out of your hand. I mean, these kind of cards usually they are the best when you don't really care what you spawn from your hand, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just adding free stuff to the board. So I feel like the shell that I would really want to try this in would be something rather mid-rangey, because you just kind of just need to move it once, right, to get the so-called free card out of your hand. So something rather mid-rangey that can fit like one or two activators for this card. You can get to dump out like a bit of free stats, and then you get points on the board. I don't know if it's gonna be enough points to beat the kind of points decks that we have right now, but I'm interested to see like what another card they make, that like this new card that they make that gives you mana cheat from the hand of sorts can do.
I kind of want to go the other direction with this card,
Okay.
where I think that this is a pure Dracula dump card, if it's going to be anything. Because this is
Mm.
effectively, like, you don't want to be playing this in a deck that's mid-rangey unless you have overlap with other movers. And if you have
Yes.
overlap with other movers, you don't want necessarily to be pulling those with Redwing. So what I want to do with Redwing is play Black Swan, and then my final turn of the game is like Iron Fist, Activated Aranya, Ghost Spider. Two of those go into like a Human Torch or something, or a dagger. One of them goes into Redwing. I pull down a Giganto. I Dracula discard the Infinite. Like, I want to play this in Dracula Dump. That is sort of where my head is at. I want to play a move version of the Dracula Dump deck, and then this is effectively I have second Dracula. I just have a bunch of numbers, and they're all on the final turn of the game. Good luck.
So I actually like your idea a lot, because I think your idea will win harder, right? But it also means you kind of have to draw your deck a bit more perfectly, right? Like you have
It
to draw.
does.
Yeah, right. So I think that's good and bad. Like I guess, but I mean, the positive of your idea is that if you are planning to build a deck to do one specific thing well, I guess Redwing helps you do that specific thing a lot better. It's just another Dracula, like you said, right? So that could be the direction. I just like this style of card. Like it opens up mana cheat possibilities that you can build around. So just really excited to see how this one turns out.
Well, you know what card is great at drawing your giant stuff out of your deck in your Red Wing Dracula dump deck? That's right, it's Thaddeus Ross. Let's talk a little bit about Big TTR. So, that hypothetical use case that I talked about right there is probably the best possible thing you will ever do with Thaddeus Ross. Like, it's definitely better than anything you can do with him in the game right now. What you can do with him in the game right now is play him in a bad version of a Surtur deck instead of either Psylocke or Juggernaut. And then instead of doing that, you can do nothing with him. So that's
Yeah.
Thaddeus Ross. What exactly do you think went wrong with this card? Do you have any idea like what it would take for him to be good? What stat line does a card like this need to have?
Well, I mean, Starline, I would definitely say 2-3 at minimum. But also, this card needs to be. We need to rewind time back to a year ago when stuff weren't as good. Like, honestly, because The thing about okay, so this is the exact same thing I said in the previous 8 cubes, and I can say it again now after the card release to confirm my predictions, which was 100% correct. Which is the Surtur deck has firstly, there's only 12 cards in the deck. The Surtur deck has zero problem drawing its 10 power cards. More than half of the deck is 10 power cards. So you kind of don't even ever need to play Thaddeus Ross. You like never need to play Thaddeus Ross. It never feels good to play Thaddeus Ross because it's firstly understated. Secondly, the deck just draws all the big stuff that you need anyway. So I feel like yes, this card would fit in the Surtur deck, but like they would have to nerf one of the core pieces of the deck into oblivion for you to want to consider playing this card.
Yeah. And I think the use case we talked about with like Thaddeus Ross in Track Dump, where it's like you only run 3 big guys and he makes sure you always have them. That's actually like probably the best thing anyone's ever been able to do.
That's way better for sure.
At least
Whether
it's a deck
the Redwing deck works or not, the use case is better than what we have right now.
Yes, like at least it is something that wants everything that this card has to offer, right? Like there are very few decks that really want what this card has to offer. That is one that like legitimately would. Even if it's not good, it is at least like, oh, I actually think he might be the best card to put in this spot. A lot of people have been saying that like here's the thing that's happened since the OTA. People have been talking about like, oh, Adam Warlock makes Thaddeus look terrible. My secret take is they're both equally bad. But like Thaddeus is just like a little bit more limited, so people put Adam Warlock in more stuff. But like they're probably both not as good as not very good. But ultimately, my instinct with Thaddeus is stay away. It's gonna be really funny if the Redwing deck ends up broken. Like if like the Redwing deck, like the Dracula dump thing ends up being like the next move bounce, just like 1,000,000 points on the final turn of the game deck, and like you need Thad for it. Extremely funny if that does happen. I don't think it's particularly likely, but there is like, I don't know, a 10% chance that actually does happen, and it would be hilarious.
Yeah, comments will be like, should have bought Thaddeus Ross.
I can't believe nobody told me to buy Thaddeus Ross. They always get so mad at me, dude. Whenever, like, the context for a card changes, they're like, content creators told me this card sucked. It's like, I can't see the future, I'm sorry. Speaking of not being able to see the future, I think the number one prevailing sentiment on social media, certainly in my comments on this channel after the Surtur nerf, was a bunch of people saying that this card was dead. I can't believe they killed the Surtur deck. Could not have been more wrong. This is still one of the 3 best decks in the game, if not the best deck in the game. And I think I want to pass the mic here over to Lamby for a sort of object lesson on why 311s are good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when the moment I saw the nerf, right, I expected the overreaction, but the overreaction was not gonna come from me. Like the moment I saw the nerf, I was like, okay, this is still gonna be a good deck. So, firstly, this deck is just the most basic deck ever. You just play big cards, big card, big cards, big cards. Play the 0 mana big card. And what changed? Well, your Surtur lost a bit of power, but it still enables the 0 mana big card to be played on the final turn. And also, this deck can run Cosmo, which is a natural counter to so many things. Like, you lose a bit of power on the Surtur, yes. I don't deny losing a little bit of power on one of your hard carries is painful. But the thing is, I was telling KM this before the video, and I think I'm gonna like reiterate it now again. Like, the only time Surtur's nerf will matter that greatly is if his nerf stops him from ever reaching 10 power. Because then you cannot use him as an enabler for the Scar, which like screws up the deck way, way, way harder. Just losing a bit of power on the Surtur is not gonna turn this deck into like a horrible deck. It's actually still a really powerful deck. And honestly, the amount of points this deck outputs, like, I mean, I mentioned a bit in the previous video as well. Like, you want to play a Mobius on turn 3, that's a 3/3. I'm gonna play a 3/5 that becomes a 3/11. I'm already bigger than you by quite a bit. You need to cover the difference on turn 4 and 5 and 6. But on turn 4, 5, and 6, I'm playing 10, 10, 10.
Yes.
And then maybe on turn 6 it's actually 21 power. But anyway.
Like, that's the thing about this deck where it's like, this is a combo deck, but the combo is you playing 4 10s.
There's no way I'm calling this a combo deck.
But like it is. Like, it's a combo deck. People play Mobius so you can't combo it off. And it's like, this is a combo deck where all the pieces are cheap beaters. It's a combo deck where every card is overstated.
Yeah.
And so
I
it's
mean,
like,
I'm not gonna
that's why
call it
it's
a combo
good.
deck because it's 410 plus 410 equals 011. I mean, but I'm not gonna call that a combo. But like, yes, this deck outputs so much stats that when you play tech cards to beat it, you are actually losing points as you play tech cards to beat it, because most tech cards are a bit understated, right? So you kind of have to play. I mean, we'll talk about it a bit later as well. But like,
Yes.
you kind of have to play like a deck that supports the tech card scaling as well.
Yeah. How degenerate have we gotten metagame wise when people are like, oh my god, my 311 is unplayable? Like, granted, they were wrong, but even having that thought is insane to me. Like, and here's another thing about Surtur that is actually starting to weird me out. They seem to have this deck on an extremely tight leash. They do not like it existing. I think in part it's because of the data set they look at when nerfing includes many bad players, and that means that decks that are easy to play, like this one, are going to be overrepresented and have higher win rates than like a true win rate would have at the highest level. But even so, if they think that about this deck, if they think it's so problematic, why do they keep making cards for it? There's one in the data mines that's like a 310. It just literally says 310 on it, and it has an ongoing ability that gives your opponents power at the other locations. But it's like, you just like, if you guys hate this deck so much, why do you keep making guys for it? I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, because every time they make a guy, it's like, okay, well, it goes in that deck, and like, what are they going to do? Make it a 3/9? Then it won't be in that deck, and everyone's going to be like, you bait and switched me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have much to comment on that, but like, I just want to say one thing again, which is that I really like the fact that Sam Wilson lets you play Call Obsidian so much
Oh,
easier.
God.
Like, I know this is not a Sam Wilson topic, but like, this is still the favorite thing for me about Sam Wilson. You can play a Call Obsidian in like with so much more ease. Yep.
It's so
That's it.
true. Doom 2099 also eating a bit of a nerf and also an indirect nerf. The actual nerf was that he got 1 point of power additionally, but all of his Doom bots now have 1 less power. They are 4 ones. The indirect nerf was that the buff to Scorpion reminded everyone that US Agent exists, and Doom 2099, now with all the Doombots losing a point of power, it's basically like playing old US Agent against that, right? Like, it is just like, you're just gonna win that lane. Like, if they don't have a loot cage, and they should be running loot cage at this point, but a lot of people aren't, you are just going to get run over by the existence of US Agent. And so Doom 2099 in a worse position than it has been in a while, I think, because of that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Doom 2099 at the end of the day is still a very simple card that scales. It's still good. Like, if you play ongoing synergies, it's still gonna matter quite a bit. And the game plan with Doom 2099 in general is just very simple, right? Like, you play the Doom 2099, you play one card, and then you scale. But like, obviously, like we talk about, okay, so we talk about Surtur getting like 3 power less. I mean, capped at 11 being like a nerf, right? This one's nerf is actually way more significant because the more bots, the more it scales, and they all compound. So I would say that when it comes to nerfs, this one got hit like way harder than Surtur. But I guess the deck is still, I mean, the card is still generally playable because it does have synergies that didn't change, ongoing synergies, Arisham, stuff like that. Like, the synergies didn't really change. So I think card is still playable, definitely got hit way harder than Surtur. We'll see how this I mean, I'm down if Doom 2099 like cease to exist. Like, with it's actually super simple and maybe a bit too simple to win with, I feel. But so I'm actually kind of like fine if it actually like ceases to exist. But for now, yes, the nerf actually is quite harmful, I would say. Yeah.
I strongly doubt it'll cease to exist, but there's one other aspect of it that I think is relevant, which is like Doom 2099 takes up spots on the board. And the more
Mm.
spots in a lane are occupied, the easier it is for your opponent to know what your
Well,
max power output in that lane
yeah.
is. Like, there's a lot of
And clock
games that
as
you
well.
can win where, like, against the Surtur Scar deck, for example, if they have 3 things in a lane, they are not playing anything bigger than 10 in that lane. It's just
Yeah.
not happening. And so you know exactly what's going on. And that kind of stuff is actually very valuable for a clever opponent. And Doom 2099, now with the spread across the board having 1 power less each time, that is very relevant, unfortunately. I want to talk about the bad girl of the meta, in my opinion, Scream, who has just consistently just been excellent for an extremely long time. If we're on the subject of cards people thought were getting murdered that did not get murdered, Scream is an A1 candidate. The buff, I would say at this point. I think it is clear that the net changes to Scream and Spider-Man were a buff to every Scream deck
Mm,
has been very relevant, but also the addition of very specifically two other elite 2-drops in the past 2 months has been extremely good for Scream. This is a deck that before January had Scream as a 2-drop and Craven as a 2-drop, and all of your other 2-drops were pretty mediocre and terrible, meaning you were very dependent on actually having one of those cards in that on that turn. Now you have 5 2-drops. You have Craven. You have Sam Wilson. You have Scream. You have Iron Patriot. You have Spider-Man at 2/4. And the deck has become drastically more flexible, drastically more unique. The ability to go 2+2 on 4 is incredibly good. This is a deck that feels to me as reminiscent of Silky Smooth as any deck has ever been.
yeah.
That is what it feels like right now, where it is just like, this is a cut above the other stuff doing stuff like this.
Yeah, honestly, I think like to be completely frank, I use the term starters, but I really just mean like early game scalers. Like you have so many like tools right now, right? And they're like mostly good. This deck used to not even really be in the conversation when it comes to like top tier decks. You know, now it's actually in the conversation because I feel the consistency of the deck is just through the roof. Like you can open with it's okay. I use this very loosely because like of other card games as well, but this deck can't really open bad. You get what
See,
I'm trying
there's
to say?
so
Like this
many
deck
good nut draws. There's so many nut draws in the deck. Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
yeah, there is like no way is a bit too strong, but there's like almost no way to like have an unplayable hand with this deck
Yep.
right now. And I think that's actually very important because if you're grinding hours of Marvel Snap and like you sometimes you just play a deck that's slightly more inconsistent but more high rolly, you get like unlucky draws and times like that, right? And then you just lose cubes. This deck kind of cannot open bad. So like
Really
if you're
hard.
grinding hours over a long sample size, you probably will have better hands than most of your other opponents' decks, which means that you get to play your normal game plan, you get to snap more consistently. And I think a lot of the decks in Marvel Snaps, like Lifeline, that get to snap consistently, usually have very good and consistent openers. And this is what this deck can do right now.
Yeah, it basically went from being a deck that was playing what I would describe Scream as before the
Scream or
change.
die.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this was 2-drop Mr. Negative, right? Like that's what the deck
Yeah.
was, right? And now it has 5 roughly equally good 2-drops. I
Yep.
mean, with 4 really, Spider-Man doesn't count, but like your bad 2-drop is just a 2/4. Like that's your
I mean,
bad 2-drop.
four good openers in a 12 card deck is
Yeah.
very high. So
Like, there are games where I'm like, I would rather play Sam and Craven than Scream right now because I can get Scream out later with like a Spider-Man or a Polaris and still get value out of it, right? Like, there are games where it's like these cards are actively better than playing Scream on 2. And that's crazy to me. Because like this is the Scream deck, but there's just so much power in it. Like, do you play Sam Wilson or Iron Patriot? Because if you play Sam Wilson first, then you can put Iron Patriot in that lane and have a much more guaranteed ability to actually trigger the Iron Patriot. Like there's so much that this deck has access to. It's honestly crazy. I wanted to talk a little bit about character mastery. I was disappointed to open character mastery and learn that I had zero 30 mastery cards. Actually zero, including Thanos, who not only do I have a variant that you can only get by finishing an album, an ultimate variant from the store, and 2, I believe, spotlight variants, as well as a video in which I famously upgraded Thanos, split him multiple times. I have effectively $300 worth of Thanos cosmetics. I do not have mastery on Thanos. And that sucks for me. I think I'll just be straight out about that. But I've been seeing a lot of complaints about mastery that are about things that I don't think suck. And like those are like, oh my god, I'm getting these bad splits right now. These suck. And it's like, I get that, but I gotta tell you, I think that like basically outside of the Ray splits, everything they added is kind of sick. Like all my decks look cooler now. I have a Miles Morales with like a fire background. I have a normal Spider-Man with a water
you have a
background.
very trippy like
Yeah.
RSM thing, right? I
Yes.
saw on your other
Yeah, my
video.
RSM deck is all pink spirals. I like
Yeah.
there on the whole a lot more cool stuff in the game. I genuinely think that the things people get mad at are just like bananas and the spirals on splits. Everything else, I think is just like the coolest stuff they've done in a while. I realize that's like a shill opinion or whatever, but like I have so much cool stuff now. My decks look so much cooler. I like it a lot more now, and it's not like borders. Like I can just put them on there.
I mean, at the end of the day, cosmetic options are always very gonna be super subjective, right? Like
Yeah.
it's never gonna appease everyone. But like I agree with you. I don't have really a lot to add on this one. But like when you mentioned the Thanos thing, I started thinking like even if I played the game a bit less recently, I have 55 Thanos splits, you know. So
Yeah, the
like
ratio of splits to variants though, like it splits barely count, variants count a lot.
yeah, exactly. Like you like it really incentivizes like spamming buying variants,
Yes.
right? So like I mean, the people that in general, I think more people. Okay, there's no data behind this, but I think most people split more of one thing than buy a lot of variants, right?
Yes.
Like that's my thinking because that's what I do as well. I split a lot more than I buy variants. I do both, but like I split a lot more. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah. I don't necessarily expect to get everything for free. I think there are a lot of good
Yeah,
critiques leveled at the system, like the ratio between splitting and variance being unpleasant, or the fact that there are a bunch of new splits that suck instead of our old splits that suck that we were used to, all of that stuff. But on the whole, I mean, like, there's a lot of actually cool stuff that they added, a lot of cosmetics that I actually really like. And also, I found the one card in the entire world that actually looks good with the bananas on it, and it is
which is
Scream, because there's a Scream variant where her skin looks like bananas, and so it's like she's like a banana monster coming out of the
uh
bananas behind her. And now I really desperately need the double banana split on Scream, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that. And they've created a new thing for me to go for, and I hate them for that. I wanted to give Second Dinner some props here. We've been, on and off fairly critical of things. We just got done talking about Mastery, which it's hard not to talk about that in a critical manner. I think I was pretty even handed, but this is a massive win that I don't think people have been talking about. Using the OTA to buff Scorpion to 2-3 and pointing out the way in which it can be used against Surtur decks was to me one of the smartest decisions they've ever made. Like that is so good, so clever, so smart. Using the combination of Scorpion and Cassandra Nova to reduce all of their stuff, to not be able to trigger Scar, to not be able to trigger Surtur, that is something that I think the metagame genuinely missed, and I include myself in that, where it's like, we probably could have been doing this before they buffed Scorpion, but buffing Scorpion sort of put everyone's eyes on it, and now there are multiple
mm.
Scorpion Cassandra Nova decks running around that have just really good matchups into that. Like, it's just a really, really clever thing, and I think some of the time when they buff something in order to attack something else, it doesn't work. Like the most recent example I can think of is buffing Shadow King to 2-3 in order to deal with Agent Venom. I think that is a much worse decision. But this time, I think they cooked. I think that is really smart dev work from them. And I haven't heard anyone talk about it. And I think they need to get a shout out for that because I don't know who cooked that up, but keep letting them cook. That is a really smart way to do it.
Okay, this one's very interesting for me because a few videos back we talked about the psychological effect of Iceman and Cork, right? Like the rocks and the reduction and the increase in cost from Iceman. So the thing about the Scorpion thing is like the effect is the same. It does what it used to do, but the thing is now, like you mentioned, the eyeballs are on Scorpion more because of the 2-3. Like 2-3 is the gold standard for 2 drops right now, right? So like if this was gonna stay at 2-2, people wouldn't even really look at the card. But the thing is now that it's a 2-3, you kind of like don't mind playing this in your deck, and the invisible effect of what am I actually reducing in power feels a bit less bad, because you're playing a 2-3 on curve. Obviously, whether you play a 2-2 or play a 2-3, it still hurts the Scar deck by quite a bit. But now that it's a 2-3, the invisible effect of am I actually reducing the right stuff, like it's less feels bad even if you don't hit, even though like the effect is the same in the past and now. So yeah, I like this change a lot, and honestly 2-2 is just not gonna be played. Like like look, we talked about Thaddeus Ross. If it's at 2-3, I can see maybe 1 in 10 games, 1 in 10 Surtur games, you see one Thaddeus Ross in a Surtur deck, but like it's not, it's a 2-2. But 2-3, yes, we might see more Thaddeus. And yes, we are seeing more Scorpion because 2-3.
I think that actually started to crystallize something for me, which is that Iron Patriot puts pressure on every 2-drop to be able to contest an Iron Patriot. And
Correct.
so if you're giving up a
Correct.
point of power, like it makes it even more required for your 2-drops to be 2/3s, basically. Like
Yes.
it puts so much, I guess, upward pressure on the stats that you have to be playable. And I
Yeah,
think,
this also sort of reinforces your Spider-Man being a good 2 sometimes as
right,
well, right? Because 2
like,
4, right?
yes, like there's such pressure on it that like you just have to be able to contest that stuff, which is part of why Thaddeus sucks and part of why buffing Scorpion is a good idea. But I hadn't really
Yes.
thought about like the way in which Iron Patriot's mere existence puts this pressure on early drops to actually legitimately matter, because if they don't, you're going to lose that lane more. This is a topic we've danced around that I wanted to sort of devote an actual dedicated section to, and it is the problem of Mobius, and to a lesser extent, Luke Cage. I don't really think Luke Cage falls in this because he's such an all or nothing card. But I think Mobius, especially, when we talk about the way in which you have to build a Mobius deck to make up for his stat deficiencies, I think that stuff is actually really frustrating to me because Mobius is a card that is here to prevent the game from getting too stupid. He is here so other people stop cheating. Whether that be a free 10 power, a million screams discarded to make your Morbius 10 jillion power, he's there to make sure that people play fair. But right now, you can't play him unless you have some way of overcoming the fact that he is a 3/3, which means there are limited amounts of decks that can even afford to play the tech card that is good against the metagame right now, which I find very frustrating.
Yeah, so I'm gonna reiterate one point that I was talking about earlier again, because I think it's very, very important, right? And I'm gonna cite a deck as well, so that you guys might be able to use it as a reference. So, I keep talking about the things whereby, so Mobius is sort of good versus the Scar deck, right? But it's
Yes.
not good because it's amazing. It's good because you don't really have a choice. If you don't play the Mobius, they're gonna play a 0/11, you know. But the thing is, so you
10,
play the
but
Mobius
yes.
on, yeah, yeah. You play the Mobius. It's 3/3. On that exact same turn, they play a Surtur. And then on the next turn, they play a 4/10. So if you think about just raw stats, playing a Mobius on 3 and then you're already losing so much stats, right? By playing the Mobius on 3 and they play Surtur. Then their next card is a 4/10. Do you have a natural 4/10 in your Mobius deck? Not always the case, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you are always already losing on raw stats by playing a card that you have no choice but to play to prevent the 0 cost one. So what I'm trying to say is that, and what KM is also trying to say is that, if your deck naturally supports Mobius, that's great. Which in this current situation is that Spectrum ongoing thing, because it naturally buffs all ongoing cards in your deck, you know. So it kind of just supports the Mobius to be less bad, because your Mobius is gonna end up being like a bit bigger at the end of the game, along with every other ongoing card you played. So I feel like your deck that plays Mobius must be able to scale quite quickly, you know, if you want to play Mobius in your deck to beat the Surtur deck. Because if not, you're gonna play the Mobius, they're just gonna play like raw stats, raw stats, raw stats, and then you'll be like, why am I still losing? Because you don't have stats.
Yep. It's such a frustrating dynamic that, like, this is a tech card that already probably has the worst cube equity of any tech card in the game
Yup.
because it's got to be face up and they'll just leave if they can't beat it. And so this is a card that has terrible cube equity, terrible stats, and is currently not doing his job. And that's what's frustrating about me. And that's what sort of differentiates Mobius from Luke Cage here, where Luke Cage is doing his job. If people want to start playing, he will do his job. You will put him in a deck and you will 8 cube the crap out of these guys who are
Yup.
relying on US Agent and Man Thing to win lanes. You're going to beat them into the ground. Mobius does not do his job. And I think that that is like, Luke Cage can afford having terrible stats because he does his job, because he has that cube equity. Mobius cannot, I think, at this point. Like, this is a card that I think genuinely needs a buff.
Wow.
Ah.
Chad, you heard it here first. Mobius needs a buff.
I would put him to 2/3, but I'm crazy.
No, I get it though. I think 2/3 makes a lot of sense, because it's like, then you free up the turn 3, because the Surtur deck, for example, only starts
Yep.
scaling from turn 3 onward, right? Turn 2 is they're just still playing like little
It
shitters, or
actually
like
matches. They're playing 2/3s
yeah.
too. Yeah.
And they only have like one drop, which is like what, Zabu, I think. But
Yep.
like, so So they don't really do anything before 3. So putting the Mobius to a turn before they start scaling, and then you can like start playing bigger cards in the 3, 4, 5, 6 slots. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KM Best. He has been Lamby Series. We will see you in the next one, and he's about to take us out.
All right, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.